Greetings, everyone. Good morning and ni hao. Ni hao is a Chinese for hello. This is Shadab Hussain, your co host of the AI Files.
And hello, everybody. I'm Jamie Basilico, your other co host of the AI Files. Um, as a reminder, this is not a Microsoft official channel, so the views and opinions expressed by myself and Shadab are our own, do not represent the views of Microsoft. So, with that, Shadab, I know we have a lot of topics to go through today. You want to give a little preview for our audience to let them know what they're going to be hearing?
Yes, absolutely. It was a packed month, last few weeks, and along with the holiday, I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. But Amazon is going through their event this week, the reInvent, and they announced major AI supercomputer plans that we will cover in this episode.
Yeah, and there's a lot of things. Obviously, Microsoft had their Ignite conference about a week and a half ago, and a lot of news that was released there around artificial intelligence. I think if I was doing count, the number of announcements were over 90. Obviously, we're not going to cover all 90 here, but major things as it relates to the AI agentic platform from Microsoft, things around Fabric that relate to artificial intelligence, as well as Copilot and Copilot Studio and the advancements there that relate to artificial intelligence. I know we have a lot of other things to cover as well. Some interesting news from Google around their new weather model, which is right up my alley, which we'll get into. And I believe there's a couple of things from OpenAI as well.
Yeah,
Correct, Shadab, that came out?
not to leave OpenAI behind, they actually rolled out their full model O1 that we will also cover. We'll also talk about the Chat GPT Pro, a new subscription model for the pro users, and
Great.
a lot more.
Yep. Yeah, and with that, I guess it's probably a good time to jump in since there are so many news topics. As I mentioned, or Shadab, I think you mentioned it, that Amazon unveiled some plans for a new AI supercomputer. The way I look at this is really in direct competition to NVIDIA to really challenge the dominance that NVIDIA has with their grip on GPUs. But this is being touted as an ultra cluster or a ultra cluster supercomputer, which will be one of the largest supercomputers in the world for training AI models. And this is going to utilize hundreds of thousands. Yes, you heard me correct. Hundreds of thousands of Amazon's proprietary chip called Trainium. So it sounds like what it is. It's a chip that's really used for training these large models. And overall, this is part of a broader strategy that AWS has, as I mentioned, to go up against NVIDIA and their overall dominance. So it's been reported that, other than just this focus on a supercomputer, AWS is also investing money in Anthropic. I think the total was over $4 billion in them as well. So this will help for training things that Anthropic has, as well as some of the models that Amazon has as well. When you look at it a little bit deeper, this new Ultra server is really powered by 64 interconnected chips, and it's really focused on enhancing the capabilities of AI around training, but really focuses its importance on cost savings. And that's super important as you think about businesses that are looking to adopt AI. If there's a lower cost for training and inference, that will translate into a lower cost for use of those models. What else do we have for us in the news, Shadab?
Oh yeah, election seasons. Of course, there are a lot of announcements related to the new cabinet. Secretaries, etc., that will come in the new year. So Trump has actually announced venture capitalist David Sachs will be the AI and crypto czar. The last name is spelling is SSCKS. Don't get excited. He is a tech investor and a podcaster, and so it's good to see another member of our podcaster community getting into the cabinet. And he will be the White House AI and crypto czar. David actually will focus on making America the clear global leader in both areas. That is what Trump announced in the social media post. David Sachs is actually a venture capitalist. He actually sold Yammer. If many people might have actually come across this, it's kind of a social media for enterprises. Many organizations that I know have actually used Yammer. He sold it to Microsoft for $1.2 billion in 2012, and he was also affiliated with the PayPal. So long time history. I think probably pal with the other PayPal, as they're called, PayPal Mafia, Elon Musk and Peter Thiel, etc. Um, Recently, he has been actually doing this podcast, All In, which is actually pretty good, a tech podcast along with some fellow investors, Chamath and Jason Calacanis and David Friedberg.
Hmm. So yeah, it's interesting to see how the cabinet is shaking out overall, but the direct impact on what it might mean for AI. There were obviously some you know executive orders that were put in place from the current administration, and having somebody focused on AI and crypto. I love the term czar. It'll just be interesting to see how that kind of progresses, and or either stymies and or advances the where we are in terms of AI as it relates to where the government has their hands in. So I'm curious to see how David fares in his new role.
Yeah, and
Speaking of,
this will be the first role of its kind. So we haven't had an AI czar of this kind. So it will be exciting to see. But it is also exciting to know that AI will definitely be the center of for all things. AI, because AI can be anything. It can be economical tool. It can be a weaponization as well. It can be education. It is going to be everything, and this is a good acknowledgement.
yep, I totally agree. Speaking of fair, this is a great segue into weather and fair weather. Um, as everyone knows, I'm a weather geek, buff, whatever you want to call it. But when I saw the news this past week, Google actually introduced a AI weather model from DeepMind, which really helps forecasters in terms of using predictive technology or machine learning technology rather than the numerical models that have dominated weather for the last, whatever it is, 30, 40 years. So what Google had created is a innovative model called GenCast, which, as I mentioned, utilizes machine learning to generate forecasts. And it actually does this based upon probabilistic numerical modeling, and also incorporates, as I mentioned, the machine learning. And what it does is it incorporates the existing techniques, but then uses ML to come up with a wider range of outcomes rather than a single deterministic projection or prediction based upon what is deemed ongoing within the atmosphere. And why this is super important is it's not so much on the global scale weather patterns, which is super important, but it's more about the hyper local and things that really equate to extreme weather events. And when you think about this, this is like tornadoes, hurricanes. So by being able to use something like GenCast with the machine learning models, it'll actually be able to come up with a more accurate depiction and a um, more accurate prediction of what is going to happen. So super important. We'll see how this fares, and I'm kind of eager to get my hands on GenCast as well, because there's been a couple of other outfits, if you will, that have started to look at AI, but it hasn't made its way into wide use just yet. So this might be the first that really pushes the envelope.
Yeah, good to see a weather news piece, Jamie, and that ignites your passion actually. So,
Yeah.
by the way, I recently watched Twister's movie, and I was actually hoping that I'll catch you in one of the scene, given that you are such a weather buff. But looks like
I,
you were probably a backstage.
yeah, I do know some folks that were actually in it. So a small community of weather storm chasers, but maybe Twister 3 I'll be in.
Awesome. We will be watching for that. And this episode, Jamie, we have skipped a few other sections. Like generally, we do the code of the week and things like that. We're going to skip a lot of them because there's just so much to talk about from the Ignite. So we'll cover a lot of launches that happened during the Ignite. As well as there were some other launches too. So not to forget them, we will start with them and then we'll get on to the Ignite launches. So you're starting with OpenAI. They rolled out the full version of its O1 reasoning model. The O1 model is also multimodal and it's faster and more precise. In fact, they've claimed that it makes 34% fewer major mistakes than the preview mode. And the preview mode itself was actually pretty good. They actually solved like complex problem, like for example, create a hand-drawn system for a data center in space, and then actually asked it to identify the cooling requirement, etc., and it pretty precisely calculated all of that. So again, pretty good model, faster as well, even better in terms of the accuracy. It also actually does a kind of a self-checking work. So it checks its own work as it performs tasks. So it's kind of like, like you can say it's like a mitigation model also in the place to make sure that it is doing all the corrected, all the things correctly. It can also reason about the image uploads, which was not possible during the preview. By the way, it was launched as part of the a kind of a, you can say, a
12 days
event
of
going on, celebration going on, 12-day sprint. They call it ship mass. So
I
there's
love that. I
more.
love that little marketing term, by the way, shipness. So
Yeah, exactly. So hopefully that will actually give us a lot more to talk about as well. We'll see what else comes out of that ship mass, but something to look forward to.
yeah, when I saw the news or announcements of the full version of O1 reasoning, I was kind of quite happy. I've been using the O1 model. As I mentioned, I'm a paid subscriber of one of the plans with OpenAI. So I've been using the O1 model for for its purposes. And again, it's a reasoning model. It's not GPT 4.0. And there are differences where it has its place, but I've been quite happy even with the preview model. So with this new full version model, and to me, one of the bigger things was the image reasoning, because you weren't able to actually do uploads before. So that even opens up more use cases on how to use the O1 model. Speaking of the O1 model, OpenAI introduced a new plan. I am definitely not on this one, a little bit too steep for my pocketbook. But they introduced a Chat GPT Pro, which is a $200 a month subscription for its AI powered chatbot. The biggest thing that I see in this is that it opens up the reasoning model. So you have full access to the O1 reasoning model. But what's more important is it actually pushes more more computing to those users on that pro plan. And again, if you've used the O1 reasoning model, you know that it takes a little bit longer. I mean, obviously it depends on what you're trying to ask of it, but it could take anywhere between like a minute upwards of 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how complex of a scenario that you're asking. So the intent here is with this O1 Pro mode that those subscribers to this 200 a month subscription are going to get more computing power to really handle those more complicated questions that are thrown at it. Little things that I would say are nice things. And I'm sure this might get ultimately pushed out to everybody, but they're going to have a light up progress bar. So for those answers that really take a long time, you'll see sort of like, hey, we're at 10%, 20%, 30%. So that will be a nice little feature. So how and where this actually is. So some future plans also around this, the O1 reasoning model, which again tied into this more expensive subscription, is the API availability. It's been rolling out. Actually, I did get access to the API about a week ago, which is indifferent to this $200 a month subscription plan. But there are other things as well that OpenAI is planning to support. Likely, this will be first introduced into this upper tier subscription. Those are things like full file uploads, more than just image reasoning, as well as support for web browsing into that model, which, by the way, is one of the big things that are not still available with the reasoning model, is the ability for it to gain access to information directly from the web. So it's only reasoning against its own corpus of info.
You're talking about the subscription, Jamie. Yeah, this is not what I'm going for, but I have a paid subscription as well, and I use it, like many times for the purpose of doing things in the personal sphere. Um, I'll tell you, I don't generally go to the oven. I feel like it's like one of those wise sage. So you need to be careful what do you approach it. I don't want to go to it like kind of with a lowly problem. So I won't use it much really, honestly, because GPT-4 has been actually honestly adequate for my purposes. But I'm going to try this out now. With this new model, probably I think it's time to actually throw it some of the problem and try it out.
Yep.
Okay.
Agreed.
Another launch from Microsoft this time, Copilot Vision. So this is a feature actually that they talked about a few months ago, and this is where the Copilot can actually read your screen, right? So it can read your screen, it can see things on your screen. You can, probably use it for, let's say, searching for objects or asking it to, just show you things, etc., like shopping assistant, etc. This is actually in the preview mode, and it is part of something what's called Copilot Lab, in which the new features are being launched. So this is actually, like the Mustafa Suleiman's group, who's actually owning this now. He's a CEO of Microsoft AI, and that team is actually now delivering all these new features. So Copilot Vision is available for you to try. The Copilot Lab is actually part of the Copilot Pro subscription, which comes at $20 a month. So anybody who's interested, they need to actually take that Copilot Pro subscription and then try out these new features. There are a lot of cool features that are actually coming out from the Copilot as well.
Yeah, that's one of those features when I saw that got released. I'm eager to try it. So maybe on our next episode, we could share some examples and our thoughts on how well that works.
Yeah, I told you about that. My daughter actually has a Copilot Plus device, and she just loves it. She's pretty much using it like every day. She does all her search on it, and she can't wait to see more features actually coming on the Copilot Plus devices.
Cool. So switching gears a little bit, let's talk about AWS. Up front, we mentioned some things around AWS was launching some new supercomputers and their chips, but a lot of that came out through AWS's reInvent conference. So one of the things that they unveiled is that they're building their own foundational set of multimodal generative AI models. So I'll have a comment at the end, but I'll save that for a minute. So I'll keep you in suspense. But so what they launched is 6 different models. 4 of them are based upon a language understanding, and 2 of them are based upon content creation. So what they released is 4 models: Micro, Light, Pro, and Premiere. And then the image and video generation tools are Nova Canvas and Nova Real. So like the names kind of imply, Micro is slated at text only. It's low latency. It's really optimized for speed and cost. And obviously that could run on, devices like phone. The Light, this is where multimodal comes in. It can handle text, images, video inputs, and it's optimized for real-time interactions. The Pro one is really the high accuracy, speed, cost efficient, and again, it excels within multimodal intelligent experiences. One that's still in training is the Premiere. This is the most capable model. Again, like I mentioned, still in training, but it really targets that complex reasoning task. Whether or not this is going to be a competitor to the O1 model, I think still a little bit left to see. Like I said, it's still in training, but those are the 4 models that they're putting out. What's interesting is that AWS's CEO Andy Jassy highlighted that these models are not only impressive in terms of speed and cost effectiveness, but one of the things that really is setting apart is that they're designed these models, again coupled with the plans around the supercomputer, to be way less expensive than the competitors out there, let's say OpenAI, by the tune of at least 75% less expensive. So this is really a compelling choice for organizations for a cost-effective set of models, again, depending upon which one you wanted to use or needed based upon your scenarios. As I mentioned, there's two other models, and these are more around content created. So the Nova Canvas is really focused on studio quality image generation with editing features as well. And Nova Reel is focused on short videos from text and prompts. By the way, one thing that was rumored, and I have a feeling it probably will be, going back to OpenAI with Shipmas. It's been speculated that Sora might be part of Shipmas. So I mentioned that because we're seeing a lot of push from other organizations. Sora was announced, probably about almost a year ago, give or take. And now, there's companies between Google and now Amazon with Nova Reel that have really, put stuff out there. So we'll see how this area kind of evolves over the next probably, couple months as far as usable tools. So anyway, that's a quick wrap up of the new multimodal generative AI set of models from AWS. Here's the one comment that I had, and I kind of teased you a little bit before. I mentioned already that AWS just sunk in $4 billion into Anthropic for the Claude models, but at the same time they're building their own models, and it follows very similar to what Microsoft has done. The multi-billion-dollar investment in OpenAI, but Microsoft has their own models in the 5 models. So now Amazon is doing the same thing, and I think this speaks to the business climate that's out here now. It's yes, you could align with one of these foundational companies, but then you're highly reliant on their models, their research and development, and then it's also from a business perspective, you're sharing that revenue. So this kind of protects, in my opinion, a company's control of models, as well as what that might mean to the bottom line from a business perspective.
That's true. And it alludes to the fact, Jamie, that there is a popular saying in the business world. It says, there is no permanent enemy in the corporate world. And that applies. There is no permanent friend too. So you never know, right? So, that's why it is important to hedge your bets and have your own models too. The only thing is, I think the Phi is more of a SLM. I don't think Microsoft has really gone ahead with any of the frontier model. We don't know what may happen. There was some rumors of my one, right, Microsoft AI model, but that never saw the day actually. So I don't know what's the plan, but yeah, I mean every company has to have the plan B plus. Like many times you need it. Like you need to embed those in the devices and computers and things like that. You don't need OpenAI GPT models everywhere for every purpose. So that made sense actually a lot for the Microsoft and even for Amazon to hedge their bets because unlike Microsoft OpenAI partnership, which is exclusive, the Amazon, the cloud is actually also available on the Google platform. So it's not exclusive to AWS. Anyway, moving on. Let's move on to the section of something from Google, the last launch news before we get onto the Ignite. So Google actually unveils PaliGemma 2, which is a vision language models. It is based on the Gemma family of models, and this is actually an upgrade. They used to have a model, the PaliGemma, and this is now the second version of it. You can say it's an upgraded vision language model. It enhances the image captioning capabilities with the detailed context-rich description. So, you can actually take this model and you can actually fine tune it. So this allows you to fine tune it. It comes in multiple parameters, like three level of parameters. One is 3 billion, another is 10 billion, and the third is 28 billion parameters. And it also comes with different resolutions, by the way. So 224 pixels and 448 pixel and the 896 pixel respectively. So it is also a model that is uh, like is basically becoming the mainstay model for the all the vision based stuff. um is Do you think, Jamie, this is equivalent to what Microsoft has, which is, I think, Florence, or is it a completely different class of the model, um, which is based on, I think, entirely on the LLMs, probably? It looks like it is based on LLMs family, like, because it's based on the Gemma family of the models, unlike the Florence, which is Microsoft's vision model, but that's not based on the LLMs.
Yeah, from the quick view or look that I've done at what Google has announced, it doesn't seem like it's in the same class of what Florence or the underlying models within the Microsoft Vision suite of AI services provides. So, um, yeah, I'd like to actually do a side by side compare, and that might be something that we do for one of the AI labs sessions that have been running. So that would be maybe something in the future to look at. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's got the same level of I don't know if I go as far as saying power, but the way that the model was built from the ground up.
Yep, absolutely. And this can be tuned, similar to, I think, the GPT models can also be actually now fine tuned using the images. So you can actually feed it the images and fine tune for it to actually recognize and read the images well. Okay, with that, time to move to the Ignite section, Jimmy. So let's start with some of the exciting announcements that happened at Ignite, and we can probably use a PowerPoint. What is the life without PowerPoint? Right? So we need to have we need to have something. Um, okay, so let's talk about the. Let me show some slides, starting with important stats to remember. 80% of AI projects are still failing to meet the expectations due to complexity. And that makes sense because the AI projects are not just simply a playground project where you just type in the and get the answer, right? It requires a lot more. It requires a lot of plumbing, particularly when it comes to the data part. There's a lot more plumbing required, and that's where things start to become murky. Sometimes the choice is about the right model that also can make it difficult. And I've seen all kind of these issues. Sometimes the expectation is the problem. There are a whole lot of issues that I've seen, and many times, honestly, it's not a technology failure. It's about the skilling issues. It's about the change management. It's about the culture. It's about the expectation. A lot of non-technical reason as well. But anyway, to counter that like how to get the integration better, Microsoft announced Azure AI Foundry at the Ignite. So this is a new. Now this is based on the existing studios like AI Studio. So this is a actually repackaging, but it's a upgrade to all those AI Studio. Azure AI Foundry now includes all the model catalog, but it also has a super integration with the dev tools like Copilot Studio, Visual Studio, GitHub, and they even allow actually the new features like, for example, agent services and Foundry. I know, Jamie, you were going to talk about that. But this is consider this like is a completely integrated workbench where you have all those services included, the models, the evals, the metrics, the governance, the reports, the content safety. You can also actually do the agent services, which will be part of it, Azure AI Foundry, and you have all the integration with the other tools like Azure AI Search, and like wherever your data is, right? So, for example, you need to have the data from, let's say, it's coming from Fabric or the files, etc. So all those plumbing is already done. Remember, and I'll give this analogy: the water that comes out in our house and goes out is far more cheaper to consume. The water itself is actually cheaper. Consider this like services you are consuming. But the plumbing, remember when something breaks down and you bring a plumber, or you have to pay the plumber for doing any plumbing, then you realize how expensive, how tricky, how complex it can be. It is same thing. An app, assembling an AI app could be tricky, could be complex. So this pre-built integrations through the for the data, for the search, all those things which is now found in the Azure AI Foundry, that could be actually the saver for the project.
Yeah, and like you said, it's the plumbing around everything. You look at what is in a name, and there's got to be a lot that goes into marketing determination of what to name things. And Foundry really is meant for foundational. And when you think about this, is that the Foundry piece is the foundational elements that bring together all of the capabilities within the Microsoft AI services under one umbrella. And a good analogy that I'll put to this is when Microsoft first started, and working with OpenAI, we had the Azure OpenAI Studio, and that was focused on one thing and one thing only. That was OpenAI and how to use those models. But over time, that shifted into Azure AI Studio, which brought in other capabilities, other models. But still, like there was, well, how do we bring together all of the new advancements that are happening within AI, aka agents, as a core cornerstone of that? But it was also how do you use and leverage all those different services that are focused around AI, but then also creating a paradigm for developers to connect quickly and to use those different tools, which is part of the Foundry SDK, which is also another important part of this. So the SDK itself, or the Azure AI Foundry SDK, which by the way is public preview, it makes all these different services accessible from tools that developers are using, whether it's GitHub, Visual Studio, and also, which is as important in my opinion, is the ability to connect into the Foundry set of services from Copilot Studio. Again, Copilot Studio, which we'll talk more about, is really focused on developing agents or customizing agents that come through from either the standardized agents inside of M365 Copilot, and or extending the things that have already been provided, and or customizing newly developed agents. So having this ability to tie back from the Foundry and the software development kit into those different tools is super important, because that's now what kind of connects all different facets of the IT community. So anyway, yeah, I could talk for a couple hours just on this one slide, but
Yeah,
um,
I know. And
but
I
it's
just
hard.
wanted to show a little bit more view of this Azure AI Foundry, Jamie. That this is you can see a little bit more expanded view of that Azure AI Foundry, all the different tools, all the data connections and provisioning, all the so it becomes like your unified workbench. It's the upgraded console that you will have.
Yep. And one of the important things here too is these integrations with various different partners. I know we're going to be talking about weights and biases a little bit later on, but these are things that tie directly back into the models and their tools that are part of Foundry. So you'll hear a little more about this later on. But again, what to me is super important is, as you're building components, like how easy is it to connect into existing sets of artifacts that may have been developed? And a great example there is when you, let's say you're building an agent and you need to expose functionality. Well, you can expose that functionality through things like Azure Functions, or Logic Apps, or even building, let's say, Power Automate flows. So it doesn't matter where these things are. And also, what's super important is the ability to tie back into the open APIs, to connect into other agents or other services that may not live within the Microsoft ecosystem. So anyway, let me jump into one other part, which is really around one of the core capabilities within the Foundry, and that's around the Azure AI Agent Service. When I go back 2 years ago, everything was all about the chat experience with these foundational models. Well, today, obviously, a lot has shifted, and the focus is on agents. So, what can we do with these models now, more than just chatting with it? How can we interact with other applications? How can we have these quote unquote AI based agents interact with other agents to be autonomous and or working with humans? So this is where the Azure AI agent service comes in. Again, it's part of the Foundry, but the agent service itself will help developers to build and deploy and scale quote unquote AI based agents across the Azure platform. So what's also important here is the ability for the agent service to actually work in conjunction with other orchestration tools, those being like Semantic Kernel or AutoGen, and also working with other orchestration tools itself. Thank you for the slide here. There are other agent orchestration tools, and the intent here is the agent service can actually work with those through that agent API. So again, there's things that we think about in terms of connectivity, like what are we connecting into? As I mentioned before, things like logic apps or functions that can work in conjunction with that agent. But then the other things that developers need to kind of consider and I don't want to say worry about, but be cognizant about are things like how are you storing memory? How are you calling out to various different RAG components? Sorry, retrieval augmented generation, tooling, whether or not that's going out to databases or search engines or things like GraphRag or the latest developments around RAG patterns. So these are things that the agent service will just inherently be able to do and help developers in those tasks that they're trying to run or create.
Yeah, I think that will be probably one of the most exciting feature, anticipated, highly anticipated feature, because that's not yet available, but coming soon, hopefully by end of the year. That's the plan. Um, Moving on, the another new exciting feature actually that was made, that is around the Azure AI content understanding. This is a completely new service that was launched. Now, this service is actually again based on the LLMs, like kind of fine-tuned LLMs. What it does is it actually helps you understand the videos, the images, the audios, and the text as well. It gives you the full understanding of that. For example, if you feed it a video, it can actually extract scene by scene the metadata. It will then understand what is going on, what is the intent, what is the action, who are the actors, what are the objects. For example, if you feed a video, it can tell you that, okay, where, let's say, if you feed it a sports video, it will tell you when the goal was scored, or when the player was falling down, when the foul happened, when the red card was shown, when was people wearing red dresses, for example. Could be anything, but it will understand, and you can do that, all of that in the natural language. So you can build those kind of solution, like complete content analytics, video analytics kind of solution, using this service. And this is actually very exciting. I personally had some experience with this one, so people will really enjoy playing with this service and analyzing their content, and get a completely new understanding. And then you don't have to like watch the entire content and sift through it, but rather just use the service to get to exactly where you want to.
Yeah, and on this one, to me, again, this is part of an evolution of various different services. So parts of what are in the content understanding were available. I mean, you look at Azure Document Intelligence to be able to sift through documents and pull out information. You look at part of the Microsoft Vision set of services. There was still is a service called Video Indexer, which will parse through and pull out, spoken word, metadata, images, or objects that are within that. This AI content understanding brings all that together under one umbrella and makes it a lot easier for organizations to tap into said services, but then also puts a an ability to tie these things back in with code. And again, part of overall Foundry. So, still going rapid fire. Like we said, there's a lot of announcements that came out from Ignite. One of the other ones was around the Azure AI search. Again, Azure AI search it's been around for a while with as it relates to AI. Again, related to the RAG patterns that you would use within your applications, also includes vector stores. So what has now been announced is a new feature around a generative query engine. So this is highly tuned for that retrieval augmented generation performance. So it's really around query rewriting. So this will take the things that you ask of it, but then actually rewrites the query to allow for basically transforms and creates multiple variations of query that you're using a small language model, which is built in for RAG. So this will enable not only faster performance, but then recall and the things that you're actually asking of the search service. What's also new is the updated semantic ranking model. So this prioritizes, the various different results coming at it based upon a ranking mechanism. And again, these are things that are going to be super important for your production applications that you're building within AI. And again, think about you could have agent services that are focused on RAG patterns. And if you're now leveraging a higher quality, higher performant, and then a ranking system within the the RAG tools, that being within Azure AI Search, that just makes the development and performance much better of the things that you're building, whether it's an agent or just a general app. So thanks for putting up the slide there, Shadab.
Yeah, and whatever you do, everything, remember, the whatever your business goals, trust is foundational. So not to forget about the trust for the AI. That is actually, again, this was a rebranding done a few months ago from Microsoft, which is earlier used to be called responsible AI, but now it's even broader. Some of the really interesting stuff in the trust for the AI is, for example, the capabilities, right? There is an initiative of secure future, like secure by design, secure in operation, secure by default, things like that. That's a major initiative that Microsoft launched actually late last year, I think. um, that brings a lot of capabilities and the commitments to the table. So there's no use of commitment without the capabilities, and capabilities are useless without the commitments. So both goes hand in hand. So commitment, for example, copyright commitment that Microsoft had made a long time ago actually, which even gives the protection from the liability from the infringement, as long as people use the Microsoft products using the Gen AI in a prescribed way. So as long as those mitigations are done, Microsoft actually protects you. The other important things are, for example, the the in the overall trust for this space, Azure AI content safety. There are lots of categories which are now available in the Azure AI Foundry. A lot of them were actually announced earlier, but they are now available, like groundedness detection. You can actually detect if the content out of the LLM is actually grounded in the sources or not. And I know that a lot of customers, etc., they have had this concern about, I don't want to have any liability due to the hallucination. So you can actually have now this detection which will actually correct. And the way it works is, there is actually, it's not just another model just simply checking it. There is actually fine-tuned model that Microsoft has as part of this detection, which actually is trained to identify the groundedness in the output. So, and that groundedness detection, you can do it, you can also enable the mitigation. So not just will detect it, it can also correct it. So I think that's a really good support for anybody who's concerned about the hallucination in their app. There were actually prompt shields also. There are protected material detection as well. Like if there is anybody you believe that might be using protected material, whether it's a code or creative content, etc., that can also be detected.
Yeah, the whole notion of safety or trustworthiness is super important. It's going to be more important as time progresses, as we have more reliance and we see more applications that are tied into AI built skills or agents. So these advancements are going to be critical as we look at adoption and trustworthiness from businesses for what is being used by AI.
That is true. And in fact, that also, like And to get really the trust, you should be able to identify the risk and do the evals on the safety. And that's what is another thing, that in the Azure AI Foundry, you will also actually have the risk and safety evaluations for images also now, not just the text. So you can actually look into the images and then identify if there is a risk and if there is a safety evaluation, and then accordingly actually judge it, right? So it can identify if the images are violating those content safety metrics, etc., that you're doing. So that can also be done in the Azure AI Foundry now. And one more thing, Jamie, are actually some new management and governance controls in the Azure AI Foundry, including like you can actually generate some sort of AI reports, which will tell you, okay, what subscription, what models, what are the evals, metrics, who's using who, and all that kind of thing. It kind of generates that, and it kind of also gives some sort of a score, so that dev can actually generate those AI reports, and that can be reviewed. So that kind of gives a comprehensive review of the application and gives more assurance into the app that you have.
Yeah, no, great features. Um, so, like we said, there's a lot of announcements that came out of Ignite. Let's dive into another topic very quickly, and that's around Microsoft Fabric. So again, Fabric is Microsoft's software as a service tooling for all things data and analytics. So there's a ton of announcements that came out with Fabric, but for AI specific things, there are a couple of things that really popped out. One is what's called AI functions in Fabric. If the best way I can kind of describe this is, these are things that are just inherent within Fabric. So if I'm working with, let's say, data in a lakehouse or a data warehouse, I can pull up functions that will enable me to work with the data and transform it in a way where it's just going to use an underlying large language model within that. Now, let me give you an example. So if you're working with Transact SQL, T-SQL inside of Fabric and looking at data, and you say, well, I want to translate some text that is within the database, right, or the lakehouse. Well, I could actually fire off a AI function that says translate, and I say translate, whatever column it might be, and it'll automatically do that translation for me. So think of these as like built-in functions that I could call from Transact SQL that enable me to do something. So out of the box, and I'm trying to remember, it was either like 8 or 10 different functions. They revolved around things like doing, as I mentioned, translation, but there's text summarization, classification, sentiment analysis, grammar correction. There's also masking of data, which is super important to a lot of folks as well. So these are just built-in functions. And again, just remember that it's pulling or being able to do this because there's a large language model that's inherent within Fabric that's enabling that. One other important piece is called AI skills within Fabric. This is also shared across SharePoint as well. But within Fabric, the intent here is that you can create a skill. The skill is really about, how do I create grounding of information that could be used in a RAG pattern. So it supports various different data sources, obviously like a lake house, but we also support the event house within um, the time intelligence, or real-time intelligence inside of it, which is the KQL database or the Custo database. But the intent here is that I can create a skill that then can be exposed through an endpoint that I could use in a retrieval augmented generation call into the Fabric. So if you kind of imagine it this way, if I'm building something within AI Foundry that we talked about before, and I'm building an agent where that agent needs to pull data from Fabric, well, that's an AI skill. So I build a skill in Fabric that exposes information that I want to expose to an endpoint that is then used somewhere within my agents. Or whatever I'm building. So that's the real power of these AI skills inside of Fabric. So I know we're running short on time. I know that there was one other core announcement from Fabric. Maybe Shadab, you want to go through that real quick? And that was around the Fabric databases.
Yeah, that was actually a massive announcement from the Fabric side of the house. The new databases that is now inherently actually part of the Fabric, so that's massive. They will bring a lots of databases in within the Fabric. Now it will be resident within Fabric. You can provision them, create them. You can migrate to, from other databases outside it. And of course, the advantage is the integration, right? The integration that it actually will provide. It will be, for example, they actually announced the SQL database now in Fabric to start with, and there will be other databases that will also be probably brought in the future. But that will be like integrated with the VS Code, GitHub. You can deploy. It has native vector and RAG support. So if you have the SQL, done. Your plumbing is already there in the place. That's it, and you can start using all that data, and like Jamie talked about the functions and etc. You can actually build on top of that. So that would be massive. In fact, that's a major upgrade to the Fabric actually in this announcement.
Yeah, not directly tied to AI, but super important because it brings in the capability of transactional database or transactional applications inside of Fabric. Which then, if you think about it, well, how do I tie that back to an agentic system? Because it's more than just analytics; it could be doing quote unquote things. So the SQL database starts to offer up other capabilities that have a ripple effect through the things that might be undertaken. So, with that said, like we mentioned already, there's just a ton of things that came out of Ignite related to artificial intelligence and agents. So, I think maybe a little teaser for the next episode. We can go we can go deep into what actually transpired around business applications, specifically around Copilot and capabilities around Copilot Studios. So, you know, new agents, new capabilities, or out of the box agents within M365 Copilot, and then all the advancements that were made within Copilot Studio, and there's ties there into Foundry. That'll be a little tee up for next time or next episode.
Yeah, so much to talk about, and but talk soon, everybody. Great talking with you all. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and like.
Likewise, have a good one, Shadab.
Bye, Jimmy. Bye, everyone.